taking care of some behind the scenes considerations. So Mike, thank you for your participation this afternoon as well. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, all. Welcome. Welcome, large urban technology leaders. My name is Ed Weisenbach, and I am the statewide technology coordinator with the Ohio Department of Education, Office of Field Relations. Thanks for taking time from your busy schedules to participate in this afternoon's call. If all of you would be so kind, please make sure that your individual microphones are on mute. We will have an opportunity for questions following this afternoon's presentations. So for those of you who were around in 2014, 2015, you might recall that the Ohio legislature at that time funded new mid-mile dark fiber circuit 10-year leases that provided your districts with a 10 gig capable connection to ORNet and the internet. The pandemic events of the past year have motivated us to review some of the infrastructures that support in-person and remote learning. Resulting from the availability of some emerging elementary and secondary emergency relief funding, the Field Relations Office has been directed to facilitate a grant to upgrade the Ohio K-12 network middle mile infrastructure with renewed 10-year circuit leases that are capable of delivering 100 gig of bandwidth to interested large urban districts and information technology centers, aka ITCs. I've been directed to fast track this project to effect a grant launch by the end of February. That's this month. This project will see the issuance of a grant to the Management Council of the Ohio Education Computer Network, also known as MCOECN. Management Council resources will work with vendors and the large urbans and ITCs to flow funds to the appropriate sources to bring this project to fruition. The intention is to provide these enhancements to the large urbans and ITCs with minimal out-of-pocket costs. On the call this afternoon, we have Mark Fulmer, Chief Technology Officer at ORNet, Jeff Andrews, Chief Executive Officer of the Management Council, Scott Gaughan, Director of Network Services at the Management Council. Also on the call is Laurie Gurman, our State E-rate Coordinator, who will be available throughout this project to offer counsel to the large urbans as they navigate through parts of this project that might intersect with your individual E-rate applications. Right now, I would like to invite Jeff and Scott to provide some additional details about how the grant opportunity is likely to unfold for the large urban districts. Following the Management Council will be Mark Fulmer to provide additional ORNet technical details. Jeff and Scott, welcome. I turn it over to you, and please direct me to the advanced slides as appropriate.
Okay, if you would advance one now, that'd be great. And it's nice to see everybody and be with you. And I'm looking forward to working with you for quite some time on this project that will benefit schools across the state, including all the schools in the large urbans. Scott is with me today to keep me on the straight and narrow, and he does a terrific job with us managing the network services part of the Management Council. And I certainly want to express my appreciation both to ORNet and to ODE, the Field Relations Office in particular, as well as to the Governor's Office, who was instrumental in making sure that this was going to fly, and it was going to fly fast. So that to give you a little bit of background, Ed mentioned that there had been, thank you, Ed mentioned that there had been a previous iteration of this, and Scott, who has been around quite some time, is shared that this is in fact the third iteration of this mid-mile project, and while the current one doesn't expire for a little while yet, we want to, we have this opportunity for the funding, so we want to make sure that that we can extend the project beyond the current horizon. There, in the funding, there are really three components that are going to be important from the perspective of the large urbans. One is the increasing the capabilities on the existing fiber, and there's some funding to support that, and that will be there'll be Ornet will be involved in that, enhancing and expanding the capabilities of the existing your infrastructure. We want to provide some funding to support that. We'd like to have this project have as little out-of-pocket expense for districts as possible, but we don't know exactly what the equipment is at each of the urbans right now, and so we can't say that that's all going to be covered. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we want to extend the middle mile of the dark fiber circuits for up to an additional 10 years. And we want to have, some of you will be able to take 10s and 40s. Some of you may have some native 100 gig capabilities within your districts now. And so if you would advance the slide, Ed, what's going to be important for us is to have good technical connections with the district for communication for the purposes of making sure that we understand what your network infrastructure capabilities are and what we need to do and what we need to help you do to make sure that they will in fact continue to grow and be able to accept these the higher bandwidth speeds from Ornet. So Scott, Gaughan, if you would touch base on anything technical that I've overlooked, and then I'll talk a little bit about how the money can flow, and then some of the communications that we need, and then I'll be turning it over to Mark Fulmer. So Scott, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Just a couple add-ons to Jeff's comments. He mentioned in the first component there, we will use your existing dark fiber connection, and in conjunction with Ornet, new equipment will be placed on that to increase the capabilities up to 100 or even potentially 200 gig there. And the second piece of that is, we'll need to work with your tech team to find out what equipment you have on your end, what interfaces that you currently have and or are capable of taking into your infrastructure, so that we can configure things appropriately. As Jeff mentioned, we will just need a contact on your end that can get us that information pretty quickly, and we look forward to working with you all.
So thank you, Scott. So from our perspective, we'll need a technical lead at each urban, and we'll also need somebody to talk to that in terms of how the fiscal transactions can take place. And it may be the same person, maybe a different person. That'll be up to each urban to decide how they would like to handle that. But since the grant is going to flow through the Management Council to the urbans, we just want to make sure that we have somebody there that we can talk to make sure that the financial transfers can go to where they need to go to and be allocated in a way that's going to make sure that it's optimized for the technical goals of the project. So I guess, Ed, my interest is in, I'm interested in having, one or two names from each district that'll serve as the primary contacts. And I'm happy to just have them email me, but I'm also happy to have them email through you if you would prefer it that way. And that's one of the things I didn't ask you before the call, so I'm sort of putting you on the spot. But how would you like to have the urbans make the connection with us?
For purposes of consistency, let's have the large urbans whoever is determined to be the primary point person, if you would email me directly with the point person from your district who will be the technical point person and the point of contact for fiscal related matters. Jeff, is that amenable to you? And then I will certainly compile a list and make that available to you and Scott so that we have hopefully seamless articulation.
I think that's great. And then everybody will have it all in one place and everybody will know how to get a hold of everybody else. So thank you for volunteering to do that with no notice.
And rest assured, large urbans, that if I don't hear from you, I will be knocking.
Ed's good at haunting people. I'll vouch for that. Okay, I think that was all that we really wanted to say by means of introduction. But happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And you see the time frame there on the slide. So as Ed noted, this is fast tracked, and so we're going to be looking to launch some activity quite soon.
This is Chris Campbell, Columbus City. I'm just wondering, is there, along with the upgrade in the fiber, will there be some funding potentially to help with increasing the internet length then that will be riding on that, as far as the actual service itself through Ornet?
We're anticipating being able to contribute perhaps $50,000 towards that. So it's not that we can't underwrite, a $500,000 firewall or something like that you want to add, but we can contribute to significantly to getting the network capability to you in that way, or upgrading your connecting point in that way.
Yeah, I'm just actually referring to the physical charge from Ornet for internet service itself, not the hardware per se, but the actual physical internet service itself.
Okay, I can't speak to that. That may be an Ornet question, but I think that the price that Ornet charges tends to be pretty consistent. But there may be somebody else at Ornet that wants to address that.
This is Pankaj. If I understand the question, I think it is that you're purchasing bandwidth from Ornet bulk to share with ITCs, correct? That's how it is. And I think the question is, as you increase from 10 gig to 100 gig, I don't know exactly how much you're purchasing right now, maybe Mark knows, but would there be additional funds to purchase that bandwidth? I think that's the question.
That is my question, exactly. I mean, 100 gig link to Ornet's great, but if we don't have the funding to pay for internet to go up to something like that, I'm just wondering if there was funding to help offset some of that cost as well, was kind of my question.
Okay, Chris, thanks. And Pankaj, thanks for clarifying that. These are all one-time fee costs that we're going to be underwriting. And so I don't think that there's anything in this particular grant. I will say, however, that the money that was in ESSER 1 for schools was $489 million for K-12 in Ohio. The number in ESSER 2 is 4 times that, it's $2 billion. The number in ESSER 3 is 2.5 times that, which is like $5 billion. So schools are going to have additional windfalls coming their way that can be used for these sorts of purposes. But it's not going to be coming through this grant.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. And those numbers were statewide. I mean, obviously it's not $5 billion coming to Columbus, as much as that would be nice.
Other questions for Jeff, Scott of the Management Council? Again, if a question emerges following this call, feel free to funnel it to me and I will make sure that it's directed to the appropriate resource for a qualified response. Well, if there are no other questions at this point for the Management Council, let's have Mark Fulmer, the Chief Technical Officer at Ornet, weigh in with additional details. Mark, welcome. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and I'm turning it over to you.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so really quickly, what this upgrade is it's a small DWDM system. It's an 8-channel coherent 200 gig system, and we're using a technology called a mux bonder. So we will light the current fiber, which in most cases is just using the pluggable transceivers and the router switches with this 200 gig transport system. And what that means is that we will have to take the current link down. We have to do something we call fiber characterization that gets us the loss characteristics and dispersion characteristics. Based on those, these are kind of built to order systems. Usually the easy way to look at it is it depends on the fiber distance. We may have to add amplification to these systems. And depending on that fiber distance, there's preamps and post-amps that would get added. So we will light the first channel of the DWDM system, and most of these we're going to be able to light at 200 gig. For some of the really long spans, and I think we have 2 of these that we've identified, we might have to back it off to 100 gig. And again, it just depends on the fiber characteristics. Once the transport system is lit at 200 gig, we can provide any combination of 100 gig, 40 gig, and 10 gig handoffs to the client. So for example, maybe the system is configured as a 100 gig, for future connectivity to 40 gigs and maybe 210 gigs, and that would allow us to put this in place, provide the existing 10 gig capabilities that you have until you get your border ready for either multiple 10 gigs or multiple 40 gigs, or maybe even 100 gig connectivity to Ornet. So again, this utilizes the existing fiber, and because it's an 8-channel system, we can add additional chassis or additional transponders or mux bonders later to provide additional bandwidth. So potentially, given the current technology, we could add another 7 200 gig channels or possibly even some 400 gig channels to us in the future without disrupting your current services. So what's important for us in planning is what are the short-term and long-term requirements for the handoffs to your system. And we understand that in a lot of cases, you may not be ready for 40 gig or 100 gig handoffs. So the system is flexible. We could even do 10 gig link aggregation. So maybe it's a 40 gig out to your premise, and then we hand it off as 4 10 gigs into your system, or maybe 2 10 gigs into your system. And that allows us to do these upgrades independent of your border firewalls and content systems and content filtering systems and whatever other border technology that you may need to upgrade. So any questions? I know we have done this for a few of the ITCs already. When we launched the original fiber program, we put a smaller system in place that was a 4-channel 10 gig system, and that was put in place either for capacity purposes or, if we had fiber spans that were longer than about 80 kilometers, between 60 and 80 kilometers is usually where we can get with pluggable transceivers. In a few cases, we can go up to about 100 kilometers.
This is Chris Campbell again, Columbus City. So if we are unable to take 100 gig right off the bat, is that something that we can eventually expand to without additional cost, or will that be a cost on the district later on if they decide, once we have the capability to go to the full 100?
So we are converging on a solution for the transport system that we are going to pre-purchase the 40 gig and 100 gig client transceivers. So there would be no additional cost on the transport. And then on the Ornet port fees, I think we are also trying to converge on some central funding for that. And Scott, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
What was the exact question, Chris?
The additional costs for for the 100, potentially upgrading to 100 gig if they only have 10 gig right now. So maybe we turn them up at 10 gig or 40 gig, but then a year from now they want to upgrade to 100 gig.
Yeah, I think we only have 10 gig interfaces on our head-end equipment, so we could probably do a 40 gig now. I'm just wondering if once we have the hardware in place to go to 100, is there an additional cost at that point, or are we able to go to 100 later on once we have that hardware in place? Was the question.
So Mark, you're going to configure the packet light to be able to hand them or provide them 100 in different configurations. And so really the only cost beyond that, Chris, will be the transceiver cost within your gear to take the right connection out of the equipment that Ornet will be putting in.
Okay,
and
thank you.
As Jeff mentioned earlier, there is going to be some financial allocation to each of the lower urbans to help offset that cost.
All right, thank you.
Other questions for Mark or Scott? Again, we do have Mark's email address for questions of a specific technical nature. I would encourage you to reach out directly to Mark for a response. And hearing no questions, let's move along to the next presenter. Mark, thank you this afternoon, and Pankaj, thank you for providing support to the call as well. So I'd like to welcome Laurie Gurman, our state E-rate coordinator. Laurie, if you would be so kind, please weigh in with any E-rate observations. And again, we want to encourage large urbans as necessary to engage in any needed conversations with Laurie throughout this project. Laurie, welcome, and I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ed, and good afternoon, everyone. Looking at, any hardware costs that may come down the road, if we're looking at September 2022, as a date to get everything in place. If there are additional hardware costs that the districts do need to incur, it would probably fit well into the next funding year because we're coming up on deadlines for the 2021 funding year. But anything that this fall that you apply for under, using your Category 2 funds, you can start the installation as early as April 1, 2022. So again, if there are some of those hardware costs that you're going to have to, incur, it may be better suited for next funding year. But I don't see any implications as far as your current E-rate funding, as this is something that the state is providing. Basically, a continuation of what you're currently doing. But again, if questions come up as we're going through the process, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you, Laurie. Let's take one last moment for questions, and please be reminded that I will be looking forward to receiving an email from each of the large urbans that identifies a technical point of contact and a fiscal point of contact. And of course, these contacts will be shared with both Ornet and the Management Council, so there is a common body of knowledge that we're operating from in our contact points at the large urbans. If there are no questions emerging at this time, again, I invite you to send follow-up questions to me, and we'll route those to the appropriate resources. In the meantime, I'll look forward to receiving some emails from the large urbans on those specific points of contact. And as always, as you need to engage me, Jeff, Scott, Mark, Laurie, please do so without hesitation. And with that, I thank all of you for your time this afternoon.
Ed, can I just jump on and say, hey, I just want to say that I'm looking forward to participating with all of you on this, and I think this is a really good news story. And so you may want to, as things go on, we may want to get some communications people involved, because this is really pretty cool, and this really does some future proofing for everybody. And so I just hope that everyone can have some good news come out of this when at a time when good news is often in short supply. So I wanted to put in that little cheerleading, Ed. Thanks for letting me break in.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. And with that, we will look forward to continued communication with our large urban partners. Thank you for your time. Have a great day and be safe.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.